So, because we're going to go over the Mike Postle scandal today, we just wanted to read the statement from our lawyers. So, just give me a second here. Let me get my reading glasses here. Okay. It's been a while since I've read from this. So, the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast is an amateur run podcast. We are not poker professionals, nor do we claim to be. Mike Postle has not been charged with criminal misconduct, and he is currently not facing any civil action stemming to his alleged activity on the Stones live streams. He should be afforded the total presumption of innocence and be allowed to prove any claims in court. So, in other words, Mr. Postle, please don't sue us. Welcome to our very special episode on Mike Postle and Joey Ingram. I'm one of your hosts, East Coast Sam.
And I'm your other host, Legend of Ben One on Poker Stars. And we've had a fair number of civil debates about various poker topics, like what's out of line at the table. Was person A out of line versus person B? Was the number nine good for poker, bad for poker, a fun novelty, whatever? And we figured we'd mix things up, because last time I did this, I sort of took the lead for the last episode. So Sam wanted to talk about Mike Postle. Originally, we were going to review like 15, 20 hours of the Mike Postle footage that was compiled by guys like Joe Ingram on YouTube. And we quickly thought better of that after, at least for me, after the first few minutes of watching the first 5-hour video on this topic. So we decided just to keep things concise and focus on just the very first Mike Postle compilation by Joe Ingram on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most notorious cheating scandal that's happened in the poker world in, last 10 years or so. I mean, this was one of the few moments in poker over the last few years that really broke into the mainstream. ESPN has done stories on this. Wired Magazine has done stories on this. It has its own Wikipedia page. Mike Postle still discussed several years later. I mean, this happened in 2019. And in 2023, he made a final table, and it was a huge news story all throughout the poker world. So, it felt important to talk about this in some detail. We talked about it briefly when we were reviewing Doug Polk's videos, and I decided we should talk about it in more detail. And also, I mean, Joey Ingram is a major figure in terms of poker media. He has, I think, 200,000 YouTube subscribers. So he's not the biggest, but he's out there, and he was the major figure in this, beside Veronica Brill, who was the Stones casino employee who made the accusations. So it felt like a good sort of 2-for-1 to talk about Mike Postle, go over our thoughts about his alleged behavior, and also talk a little bit about Joey Ingram as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was really surprised upon self-reflection of how I kind of evolved my perspective on this subject as I was watching this 5-hour video by JoeIngram1 on YouTube. It's a 5-hour video. I watched it in 1-hour chunks at 2x speed, and luckily things kind of get mixed up a little bit over the course of the video. The first portion of it is just literally Joe watching these raw hands from these Stones live poker streams, and then over the course of the video, he watches evidence, like counter evidence by Mike, that he posts hands where he lost, or he finds other people message him certain clips that are relevant to the matter at hand, or and all the while Joe is just he's being himself, but it's almost like he's a character in that he's keeps repeating he's a god, like he's either cheating or he's a god, and it's just like there's definitely a strong element of comedy to this whole viewing experience.
Yeah, I mean, and give Joey credit as well that he starts the stream right off by saying, like, we're just looking at hands, we're just going over this stuff. I'm not alleging 100% that he's cheating. And he's bobbing and weaving throughout making these comments. But yeah, like every single time he makes a joke about Mike being a god, like I just laughed. I just thought it was so funny. And he's also saying, like, I'll stake you in any tournament, I'll stake you in any cash game, you just let me know, Mike. And was open to also having interviews with Mike and so on. So he does present this fairly neutrally, so give him credit.
Neutral with an asterisk, because it does seem like he's anti-Mike kind of from the start, and the level of like sarcasm and like anger or incredulous is in fluctuation throughout the entire video. And again, I guess I kind of came to this whole video with the I guess almost the initial bias that he was guilty. I mean, I hadn't seen literally any of the evidence. I only knew the story existed. And at first, it's kind of like when you're in a courtroom and you see like circumstantial evidence for Exhibit A, and you're like, well, it's ambiguous in court. It has to be clear cut. And then once Exhibit B, C, D, all the way up to Z are on, you're like, okay, this all just can't be totally incorrect here. Something's gonna stick here. And so at first, poker players, this in this stream in particular is, again, it's he's sort of skipping through just the hands that Mike's playing, and for the most part, most of the hands Mike just plays at a very high VPIP whenever they cut to the statistics. So we see that he's in a lot of hands, and after a while, it just kind of gets ridiculous. And then once there's clips of Mike Postle actually like being in the commentary booth, commenting on his plays, or not really commenting on the plays, just kind of like just talking about them in those vague or like unhelpful terms completely. That's when the needle for me kind of swung to, yeah, I think Joe's right here.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the idea that I had. I mean, going into this, I had a perception that, there was at least very suspicious behavior going on. But I mean, there's nothing wrong, first off, with playing any two cards and getting involved in a lot of pots. And it's also, I think I talked about this with Martin Cabral as well. When you have the idea of somebody's cheating, little things that seem innocuous to everyone else all of a sudden become suspicious. Somebody who looks off to the side or stands up out of their chair, now all of a sudden, like, oh, that's behavior of cheating, when there's a bunch of innocuous explanations. So a lot of it at first is focused on his body language, that he has his hand in his lap, that he's sort of smiling awkwardly, which could be proof of cheating, but could also be proof of a bunch of other things. But then, like, once you really start getting into these hands and just getting into the fact that, Mike never really gets out of line on the river. I mean, he's always able to shove and get people off. He's never bluff shoving into the nuts. He's never really making mistakes like that. That's when things just start to add up. And, the real damning piece of evidence is the fact that he just never had a losing session, that he went like 36 sessions in a row, all winning, most of the time by very big numbers. I mean, there's heaters for sure. I mean, I won on a heater at the MSO, but I still lost a lot of times at the MSO. So it's like, you'd figure every now and again, he'd have a losing session. And then you start to add in these little body. I mean, the big body language thing is just how often he's looking into his lap, which doesn't really come up in this stream very often. But if you watch other compilations, like, he does this really weird thing where he like flips up his cards, but instead of looking here, he's like looking down here, and he kind of like adjusts his hat to make it seem like he's not, looking at his hand, which is right here. It's just very strange.
Yeah, and really, what I was picking up on was his, his gameplay habits, in that, when he was inconsistently like overplaying or not, or, value betting top pair, versus when he would just like get out of the way when he was beat, or being willing to go into a pot, 3, 4, 5 ways with like two cards that ended up being like live. Like, there was a great hand where he had 5-4 and both his opponents had ace king, and he called it all in. And if you have 5-4 and your opponents have ace king, both of them have ace king, then that's mathematically a good call. But I mean, how often you're going to run into like 2 10s and ace king, and then therefore 5-4 is not a play, but he didn't do that. I mean, it's 5-4. I don't care how much money you invested from like the 3-bet. If someone 4-bet shoves, 5-4s will fold, especially in a cash game. In a tournament where you have a chip lead, you could maybe make some other arguments there. But that was just, again, one of those red flags for me. And yeah, he doesn't really look at his phone. In a couple of the early hands, he does do that in the 5-hour video we watched. But later on, that's less of a factor, really. So something I was doing was I was taking notes of different hands that caught my attention. And I think in this 5-hour, I didn't write about every hand, but I wrote a total of 16 hand summaries in my notes over the course of 5 hours, where the action really jumped out at me as odd, or if you were going to have like the pros and against, pros and cons, I guess, against Mike Postle, these should all be in the against Mike category. And it adds up when, and I didn't know how many hands were going to jump out at me in this respect, and to have 16 in a 5-hour span, that definitely was substantial to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of stuff like, Postle having aces, and a guy has a straight on him, and rather than bet big on the river on a fairly dry board, obviously the other guy has a straight, Postle bets very small. and then the guy raises him and he folds. So it's just kind of like, okay, I mean, that can happen when you have pocket aces, you know. I don't, you know, maybe he reads him as having a set and folds or two pair or whatever. But then stuff like him having 9-6 off and him being able to shove after a raise, a fairly big raise on the river is just, you know, things where it's just like, what? And to hear these commentators too, this is a running theme throughout this entire video. The commentators are very much rooting for Mike. I mean, beyond like Norman Chad, like sort of playing, you know, playing the underdog. You know, like Norman Chad's building a character, right? But these commentators really feel like they are like head and shoulders like Mike Postle fans. And as time goes on, Joe Ingram's pulling out clips of the Stones Casino people doing jokes that Mike is apostle and he's God, and they're flashing all these graphics on the screen. There's like 5 different graphics celebrating Mike on the screen. Where I'm not accusing the commentators of cheating or anything. It's just there's this very clear ethos of Postle is the guy to beat the top guy, which makes cheating accusations more believable.
Yeah, and you know, as far as the attempts by Mike to kind of defend that he does lose some hands, he does lose some hands, but it almost felt like he was playing like defense against accusations. He knew that he had to lose some hands, and so it'll be like this odd like small turn or river bets that he gets blown off of a raise where he folds the inferior hand, or you know, he loses or at one point he bluffs of ace-9 high or like ace-3 high or something and gets called by ace-9 high, where like, you know, it was in line with his past sort of aggressive play that was, you know, on some of a suspect hand, but the guy kind of, you know, somehow makes a bizarre, like the 1 in 10 shot that someone makes the hero call of ace-9 high. So it wasn't really a hand against that, you know, allegation of cheating. It was just more of a, you know, sometimes you're going to run into someone who just doesn't believe you. And so, and again, having to be defensive at all, you know, it's a lot easier if you can adequately explain the logic behind your actions. But again, which leads me to that section where he's in the booth defending his actions, where he's like, well, I had some wine, so I just figured usually I make the call there, but instead I drank wine, so I didn't. Like, he doesn't use like poker terminology or poker logic trees to explain a certain hand. He just sort of, you know, stumps his foot on the fire of that hand by like, you know, oh, you know, I just decided I was going to do this. It doesn't actually explain why, which you're under no obligation to explain why you made a, you know, a raise or a call as a poker pro. You're trying to, you know, keep your own game to yourself. But at the same time, if you're not going to tell us why, then just don't, you know, just say, I'd rather not say it's, you know, I'd rather keep that to myself because I don't want someone to copy me or something.
And another thing was during his commentary, he talked a lot about how he would look at players and read them. But when you watch the footage, Mike rarely is looking at people. He's often looking down toward the felt or down toward his chips, or as I mentioned, toward his lap, as not in this 5 hour, but in other clips. So it's like, how are you supposed to get a read on people if you're never even really glancing at them? His table talk's very minimal, which again isn't a sign of anything, but it goes to show that he's really doesn't seem to be engaging with people at the poker table to justify these decisions he's been making.
Mm-hmm. And so again, I you know, it was funny. I was so kind of bored by the first hour of this video, and then I came up to kind of more appreciate it as Joe gets more and more exasperated and more incredulous at what's transpiring. And again, he kind of already knew this was going on, so it wasn't like, you know, totally shocked. Because he'll like flip a hand and be like, "Oh, this hand's sick. Watch this hand." Like obviously had watched this before and knew mostly what was coming up in that video. But the escalation of his reactions is very funny. But I don't think I would probably lose my sanity if we had to watch like 3 more of these 5 hour videos just to do this entire topic. So I'm kind of glad we kept it at 5 hours for this.
Yeah, I mean, probably, I think I've talked about this hand before, but my single favorite hand in this whole thing is the cards are wrong hand. So there's this hand where Mike's involved with, I think it was like 9-8 or something, and the cards get played out. Mike is going to lose the hand, but he bets big on the river. And as he's like assembling his bet, the commentators all of a sudden just start going, the cards are wrong. Oh, the cards are wrong. And then just magically the graphics on the screen change. And then all of a sudden Mike has a nut straight. And Mike bets, the guy folds, so they don't reveal their cards. So we don't see if the graphics are right or wrong at all. And I mean, Joey was losing his mind. I mean, he's jumping out of his seat. He's just freaking out about it. And apparently they don't show any other hands, but the graphics were wrong. But Joey said that there were 3 other hands, or this was the 3rd hand, in which the graphics were wrong, and it all benefited Mike, which is again just really bizarre. I mean, I recall watching the WSOP live footage that there were occasional graphic errors, but those graphic errors were immediately changed, were very just fluke, sort of just misread the cards briefly. Never something like all of a sudden you watch 5 streets and then all of a sudden the cards change. I mean, I've never seen something like that. And to change so entirely from, 2 rags to the nut straight, it's just bizarre.
Yeah, and there was also a few hands where Mike's cards literally weren't shown. Like it was almost like a informal wild card hand, and it was only ever happened to Mike. It was never other players that were subject to that, graphical error of the RFID or whatever it was from. So again, this is all kind of just these weird. It's weird, like circumstantial evidence, but you put it all together into this equation, and it definitely, should raise a lot of eyebrows, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, let's just say 5 hands out of context. Yeah, I mean, it can seem circumstantial, but again, you add up the fact that there really just isn't too much consistency in his play in terms of when is he folding top pair, when is he calling, other than the fact that he just always seems to have it. I mean, he just always seems to be making the right decisions. And yeah, like he loses a couple of hero call, because a couple of guys hero call him. He maybe could bet a little bit more for value in certain spots. But yeah, it's just all, again, just very strange stuff. And then when you add in that Postle had connections with Stone's Casino and knew what he was, apparently was involved in making the live show. Yeah, I mean, again, I can't make that 100% accusation of cheating, also because I don't want to get sued. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand why this guy is so controversial.
Yeah, and obviously someone could probably say, oh, well, if you isolate hands here and there, but that first, couple hours of this 5-hour video is all consecutive from the same session. If it was like, if you'd played, 1,000 hours of poker and you found 17 hands where you won with these weird raises, that means you could conceivably have double as many hands where he did the same thing and lost the hands. But in this case, this is all kind of in the same table, the same session. And so that's where there's no real dilution factor where, even Negreanu, as great as a player he is, he's going to, make the right choice plenty of the time. He's going to make the best hand lose. He's going to make the right one decision sometimes, and it's all in balance, but, it's all about, being in the green versus in the red. And in this case, again, I would definitely, I don't blame the poker community for having the reaction and the, skepticism that this situation warranted. Obviously, it's kind of, the matter's kind of dead. If you read the Wikipedia article, for example, it's over in a sense. But you have to wonder if, in the future, maybe some sort of information will leak out, or, you never know. No story's ever completely dead.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, Postle made a final table at a small tournament back in January. He got 7th place for $32K. And again, being fair to Mike, he's had Hendon Mob results going all the way back to 04. Fairly steady over the years, nothing too big, very small WSOP caches here and there, no main event caches. So, he has some talent. It's just, again, looking at this Hendon Mob, I see a lot of very small tournaments. Most of them are under four figures in terms of their buy-in. I mean, $100 tournament here, a $200 tournament here, and he's won a few of these tournaments. But again, if this guy values his skills so highly, if his justification for his hands is, well, I'm just this like incredible soul reader, I know what these players are having, why is he not being involved in higher stakes tournaments? Why is he not being involved in higher stakes live streams? Why is the Stones Casino live stream the only one in which he's willing to play these stakes and play like this? Again, the track record over the years, yeah, I mean, it suggests that he has some level of skill, but it also, again, still raises all these questions about his behavior during these streams.
Absolutely. And obviously each sort of ecosystem of the poker stakes world, you have the 1-2 players, a la from our favorite documentary back in the day a couple of years ago. You have the 5, this is a 5-5 cash game with Stone, so that's sort of the stakes there. And then obviously, if you watch Brad Owens vlog, you can see he's played from the smallest all the way up to the blinds being hundreds, thousands of dollars at different casinos. So he's under no obligation to play beyond his comfort level as far as, as the skill level does increase as you play bigger. But nonetheless, you'd think maybe he would have dabbled in, a little bit higher buy-ins for tournaments or for cash games just to sort of, use those amazing skills he supposedly has. So it's definitely part of the story here.
Yeah, I mean, again, like he's been doing this for 15 years and he's essentially stayed at the same stakes over the years, which again, you should do whatever you want. If Stones is your favorite casino and you want to play every single tournament that Stones has to offer and Stones is smaller stakes, that's totally fine. But I mean, when is the point that you step up to the next level and you get to higher stakes, and why is it that you're not stepping up to higher stakes at any other location but this one? Just again, nothing concrete in terms of, this isn't clear proof that he's cheating, but again, you just start to raise these questions. There's not enough answers to them. And then you add in all these hands and you add in the winning sessions, which to me really is the linchpin of the case against Mike. That's just, he never had a losing session. Most of his sessions he won tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, I think he won like $250,000 over these sessions that he's been accused of cheating in. That's a lot of money at the stakes like this, at these small stakes. So it just doesn't look good for him.
Yeah, and again, you have to wonder if he was cheating. How was he cheating? Was it an earpiece telling him what his opponents had? Was it his phone? Was there like a vibrating thing where, like, if your sock vibrates, your opponent has the nuts. If your right knee vibrates, then you have a better. Was it some sort of technological cheating, or was how there's nothing on the camera that can really specifically say this could have been maybe the method by which they cheated the table. But again, I think back to Robbi Lew and how that's kind of that's just one hand versus this is hours and hours of documented play. So that's kind of a micro version of this Mike Postle situation. And again, either way, we don't know to even think what was the method of cheating.
Well, I think the theory is that somebody in the booth, not the commentator's booth, but behind the scenes, was sending him the information of other players' hands through text. So that explains the phone in his lap, why he was looking down during decisions, things like that. Not in this stream, but again, in other streams I've seen, there was one point where Mike turned out of sort of apropos of nothing, turned and said to somebody, "Where are the cards?" There were other points where the RFIDs didn't quite read other players' cards and Mike seemed confused and didn't quite make a decision. And I mean, when we watched the stream here, I mean, he was making decisions very quickly. When he was beat, he just folded his cards. The pauses were very, very short. When he knew he was ahead and he was raising, he would maybe pause for a brief moment, maybe for effect, but then he would put his chips out very quickly. I mean, he never took like longer than 10 seconds for a decision. He was moving very, very fast. Whereas the other players at the table really depend. I mean, I recall a couple of tanks throughout the stream from other players. So I think that seems to be what the strategy is here. And I'm glad that you brought up the Robbi Lew thing, because again, that was one hand and people have gone over the other hands she's played. And yeah, like she's just an amateur, I think she got flustered in the moment. What she was saying after the hand was done was her trying to, seem better than what she actually is as a poker player and save face in the moment. I think she just misread her hand is what happened. Thought she was calling off with bottom pair. She was actually calling off with the jack. So, I mean, I think that's the situation with her. But with Postle, again, it's dozens of hands over dozens of sessions with consistent behavior throughout. So,
yeah. So I'm definitely more on the pessimistic side of this story, to put it lightly. But thank you, Sam, for bringing this to my attention so that we can discuss it. I think if anybody listening here has their own thoughts on the Mike Postle story, let us know in the comments. We're happy to hear if you've played with him, if you've been a part of a conversation about him with someone in the poker world that have some insight. Let us know. We're happy to include you in our discussion.
Yeah, and again, in terms of the Joe Ingram side of it, in terms of how I felt he was a presenter, yeah, again, he made a lot of sarcastic comments about Mike, but I think, yeah, repeatedly he brought up that they're just looking at hands. They can't make a formal accusation. He was reading comments. He seemed very attentive toward the people he was watching. So I have a good impression of Joey off of watching this. I'm not too familiar with his content. I've seen a little bit of his stuff. But yeah, he's definitely somebody I would want to keep my eye on, and maybe we can do a sort of segment later on going over his edited videos, not just these long streams, and give more of a review of them. But yeah, I like his stuff.
Yeah. So thank you, Sam, again for your part in that this story. I think we're going to move on to a couple of teaser trailers for some content that we'll probably be reviewing and podcasting about in the very near future. The first of which is the Mike Matusow documentary teaser trailer. So this is the documentary that Matusow kind of alluded to when me and Adam Grossack and Zach Grossack in Vegas a couple of years ago saw him with his camera crew. Again, I would be shocked if somehow any part of that conversation made it into this documentary, but it'd be pretty funny. And we kind of are maybe informally the biggest poker documentary experts on the internet here. So I feel like it's only fitting that we will eventually cover this one so we can have a full rounded coverage of all the major poker docs out there.
But we got to review Robin Amber Against the Odds, which we don't own Ben and I live in the same apartment. We don't own a television anymore. So if somebody would like to send us a television and a copy of Robin Amber Against the Odds, then we will have talked about all of the documentaries related to poker. So I'm curious to see this trailer though. Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna do it. And then also I figured we could also watch the upcoming poker reality competition show Game of Gold, and we can watch the trailer of that, and we can discuss that in a minute. But let me do a screen share of these. Oh, here we go. Perfect.
So Ben, you have seen this teaser trailer, or you haven't?
I have seen both of these teaser trailers, but I know you haven't. So
yeah, I haven't.
So we can do that. And all right, you can see it fine. And here we go, full screen it. And all right, I will shut up while the trailer plays.
The following announcement has been paid for by Big F Pictures. How do you want to be remembered in the poker industry? And
the screen doesn't seem to be working.
Oh, it's not. Oh, screen share is paused. Oh, sorry, guys. One more. We'll try this again. All right,
there we go. That's better.
Pictures. How do you want to be remembered in the poker industry and in life in general?
In the poker industry, I want to be remembered as one of the pioneers that built the World Series, built the World Poker Tour to what it was. I believe in my heart, without me and Phil and Daniel and Ivy, the poker wouldn't be where it is, and Moneymaker, poker wouldn't be where it is today. Everybody in the poker world will always say Mike's got a heart of gold. Mike can do anything for anybody. Let me say all this.
What? What? James Woods. What the heck? Obligatory strip club scene, right?
It's fucking nuts.
Interesting.
So I'll admit, it looks pretty horrible in the sense that, you know, it just kind of seems like a camera crew just kind of follows him around, and it's a pretty recent, I think, compressed time span given his hair. It's you know, probably something he's set out to do over, like, you know, maybe 2021 into 2022 maybe or something. And you know, it definitely looks less sort of self-congratulatory like the Kid Poker documentary. But I'm definitely concerned it's going to be kind of a shit show.
Yeah, Mike is such an interesting figure in the poker world, right? I mean, in the early 2000s, he really was one of the most feared and accomplished no-limit poker players in the world. I mean, not just no-limit, I mean, Omaha as well, a lot of other games. And his story is just so interesting, and you can have so many different conversations about it and talk about, you know, can you celebrate somebody in any activity who has done the things that Mike has done, you know, doxing players and making the threats that he's made to beat people up and all that, as well as, you know, his arrest and things related to that. You know, you could make a real serious, interesting documentary about him, to just have him partying with a bunch of strippers and showing off James Woods and all that. I think it's just kind of missing the opportunity here, especially when you have all this footage of him. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I imagine there'll be some insight into his life a little bit, hopefully. But if you want to talk about his medical experiences and his health issues and all that, that would be interesting too to talk about. It seems like they've got some footage of him at doctor's appointments and stuff. That might be interesting to see. But you don't need to sensationalize it. His story can speak for itself. So we'll see. I'm kind of with you on this one. I've it seems like a bunch of footage. If it's entertaining, it's entertaining. But hopefully they can treat Mike with some degree of seriousness. So.
Yeah, I mean, I want it to be a respectable documentary. I don't want it to be just a Narm Matusow, fiasco here. But again, I will try to approach it when I am able to watch the full documentary with an open mind and give it a chance. Because again, teaser trailers sometimes can be misleading or just trying to give you the most thumbnail worthy moments or images. So I'll grain of salt obviously, but we'll see.
Yeah, and Mike is just such an entertaining person that I'm sure just because it's Mike Matusow, this documentary will have something to it, but we'll see.
And again, if I'm in it and even like a split second, then automatically 5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, of course.
Moving on then to this sort of surprise. I mean, we had talked about how the big game is returning for season 3 coming up, and I wasn't expecting a second poker show that I would be equally as excited to check out as this little project called Game of Gold, which Twitter described it as Survivor meets high stakes poker. So it clearly is going to be some. So let's watch the trailer. I watched it briefly once, but it was a while ago. So we'll watch it together here, and then we'll discuss.
Looks like the first episode's up. If you look at the side there, I thought it said the first episode was up. Yeah, right there, one of a kind, Game of Gold.
Oh my God, you're right. So we'll watch the trailer and then we can worry about that later. But we could be, maybe the first podcast ever to literally podcast about Game of Gold. That could be pretty exciting. But here we go, Game of Gold trailer, and then we'll discuss.
I had no idea what's going on. Knowing the fact that we don't really know what's happening on this one, it's really unique.
The fact that I'm here, it just means so much to me. It really does. I just got goosebumps, man. Like,
dude, you won Player of the Year, not f***ing around.
U16 will be whittled down to just one in various poker challenges. That one champion will receive $456,000. I underestimated this show's capacity to bring out the emotions of people. So wait, you know it. He's out of it. Just shut the fuck up, actually. No. You tricked me. You're being aggressive. Just go fuck yourself. Am I friend with these guys? What?
Only born at night, but not last night. Bluffing?
How dare you ask that?
Huh.
So Negreanu has described the show as the most fun poker show he's ever been a part of ever, and he's been on a lot of those shows. So that definitely means something. So there you have it. That's the other trailer. Sam, what do you think? So
it does look interesting. I mean, I like Survivor. The idea of voting people out and then eventually, the jury has to decide who wins. It's sort of a twist on the elimination format. So I imagine when they say Survivor, there's no voting out element, or maybe there's like one challenge where you have to vote somebody out or something. But I imagine it's mainly just sort of challenges and competitions and so on. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that would work. It seems like they have a good cast. They have a lot of, I saw Charlie Carroll in there. There was Maria Ho in there. Obviously Daniel was in there. Fedor Holtz was in there. Yeah, I mean, this seems like an interesting group of people to throw together into a room and do all these cool challenges.
Yeah, and again, I think back to the kind of the not trademark, but sort of the industry leading reality show podcast community. Rob has a podcast. They even just do episode by episode podcasts. So I think maybe we could watch the first episode, decide if it's worth doing a whole podcast on one episode, or maybe a couple episodes. We can sort of figure it out. But really, for me, this show is going to come down to the structure, how the challenges are laid out, how unique they are from each other. The balance of the gameplay with the characters, while they're, there's some sort of like, I guess, like back room where the tribes can or teams can watch the challenges, maybe if they have one player playing in it. So again, there's definitely some, opportunities for this to be, a unique show. And again, even if this first season, gets some things right, some things wrong, if they do a season 2, they can make adjustments like reality shows often do. So again, I'm going to approach this with an open mind. I'm very excited. Obviously, the prize 4, 5, 6, in reference to Squid Game, I think it's not life-changing money for these top poker pros. Obviously, they want to win it. But I guess I'm surprised they couldn't have had like some like average Joes and some top pros to kind of make that prize money mean something to some of the cast. So that's maybe one thing I might have changed if I was making the show. But I'm excited, and I'm happy to maybe discuss with you and for future episodes.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, this looks interesting. It looks like they put some thought into the way the set looks, the screens, and all that. Obviously, the background's just sort of a basic back room. Everybody's mic'd up. It's curious to see how exactly is the conflict actual conflict, or is this typical reality show conflict where they edit clips together to make it seem like they actually hate each other, but they don't. Yeah, it seems I like what I saw in the trailer. I think it looks interesting, and definitely I imagine if they ever do seasons 2, 3, 4 of this, they would have like a fans versus favorites type thing where they'd have like 8 Daniel Negreanu's and 8 average Joes, or they'd have one whole season that's just average Joes. I could see them doing something like this. It's as long as it's better than Face the Ace, I don't care. So that's not a high bar to set.
And I think from what we saw, they're going to be about 1 hour-ish episodes. So maybe if they have like 1 elimination per episode, then we're looking at maybe like a 15-ish episode season, or maybe 12 or something if they have a double elimination or something like that. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued, and we'll discuss, and again, if anyone has their own thoughts on these trailers, or if they want to join us to be a part of a watch podcast versus a rewatch podcast, and then that's a little bit different for us. It'd be very exciting, and again, we could be the first podcast ever to review the show, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if the first episode's already up, I mean, I'm happy to watch it, and then we can try to get an episode out, next week or something, and get our foot in the door. But yeah, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to offer about anything we've talked about, the Matusow documentary, or this, or Mike Postle, please drop a comment in the discussion below. You can also give us any suggestions you want for any poker-related content you want us to cover. We're always sort of looking for new ideas. And as always, we're always looking for any interviewees who may want to appear on the show. You don't have to have any major poker accomplishments. You don't have to play the main event, whatever. If you have something that you want to talk about, we're happy to have you on. And if you have a book you want to plug, by all means, you can plug the book. So
I'm glad you mentioned poker books, because I actually ordered the book that Dr. James Magner told me about when I was in Vegas this past summer. So it should be arriving pretty soon, and maybe we can do a little book review about it. It's supposed to be a pretty unique poker book, so could be another thing to throw in there for a future episode of our podcast.
Oh, that's very cool. I didn't know you had ordered that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like $4. I couldn't believe it. Amazon, good price, I guess. Sorry, Amazon plug there. Sorry. In any case, guys, thank you for listening for this latest podcast episode. You'll probably hear from us pretty soon for our next one to discuss the pilot of Game of Gold. Very excited. And until next time, guys, enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, enjoy your poker on TV.
Mike Postle, please don't sue us.
Bye, guys.
Don't sue us, buddy.